Welcome to the Red Dice Diaries podcast. As you may or may not be aware, it's Anchorites Appreciate Arneson month. And I've got to admit, I don't know a great deal about Dave Arneson myself, but it's AAA month, so we're going to be coming at you like a tiny battery full of RPG goodness. But before we get down to that, I'm going to answer a few call-ins, so take it away.
Hey John, it's Whisk. Alright, so books. You know what? I don't game, but I do have cookery books, and I like when they lay flat. Same with journals. I just like when they lay flat. As far as landscape, I'm looking at my shelf right now, and I have an Alton Brown book, and it's I'm holding it right now. It's an odd size, and it doesn't quite fit in with the rest of the books on the shelf. And then the other thing is I have a book stand. So when I'm learning from someone or studying from someone, I'll put it on the book stand. And this one does fit, but it comes out a bit, where the other ones, most of the other ones stay in. But you know, I don't mind it. I still like the book because it does lay flat for me, so I like that, but it definitely takes up more room than the others when I'm studying something or learning a new formula or something like that. Anyway, happy weekend. Whisk out.
Hi, Ivy. Thanks very much for the call-in. Yeah, I entirely agree. The sort of irregularly shaped or odd-shaped books, they're more difficult to fit on the table. I mean, I've lost count of the times I've had like a bit of a weird-shaped book, and I've been reaching over to get something during like one of my online games, and I've just caught the edge of it with my elbow and like knocked it off the table. Then you have to rummage around to like pick it up, and all the while you're doing that, you're not really engaging with the game. Also, yeah, I like a book that lies flat, that I can have it on my little table next to me while I'm gaming, and I don't have to worry about pages flipping over or like putting multiple bookmarks in it or anything like that. Thanks very much for the call again, Ivy. So let's see who we've got next on the list.
Hey John, Jason here from the Nerds RPG Variety Cast. So I have solutions for your landscape book problems. Make sure your sarcasm meter is set properly. So when they're in your bookshelf, you just get yourself a piece of paper and you fold it so it's you fold it so it fits around the book, right? So when you're looking at it, instead of seeing the edge of the pages, you're seeing that piece of paper, and then you write the title of the book there on the side, and then when you look at it, you're seeing the title. When you pull the book out, that piece of paper that you got folded around the side of the book comes out, and then you just put it back when you put it back. As far as laying flat, well, you take those soft cover landscape books and you cut the spine off and you spiral bound them. And once they're spiral bound, all your problems go away. Problem solved. And John, like I say, I'm kind of pulling your leg. Your points are valid, but I'm just kind of messing with you by giving those answers. I'm not trying to piss you off. But anyhow, well, piss means something else over there, doesn't it? I'm not telling you to take a piss. Wait, that doesn't work either. Piss means get drunk over there, doesn't it? Anyway, you know what I'm saying. I'm just messing with you. So, have a good day, sir.
Thanks for that, Jason. And yeah, don't worry about it, dude. I fully got that you were sort of pulling my leg and sort of messing about a bit. I mean, I'm an English person. Sarcasm's like our second language over here. We're well acquainted with it. And as for the word piss, it has numerous different subtle inflections and meanings over here. We can say to get pissed, getting drunk, as you'd say, obviously going for a piss, or as you rightly said, correct use of it, taking the piss, just having a bit of a laugh and general japery. Although I've got to admit, to be honest, although I got that you were just joking, I did find myself thinking when you're talking about putting like paper labels around things, going, do you know what? Actually, that could just about work. So you never know, maybe there's something in there. But I'm hoping that not too many sort of manufacturers will go down that horrendous and thrice damned landscape route. But thanks very much for the call-ins, Jason. Take care, and I'll catch you soon. Right, let's see who we've got a message from next.
Dude, I could not agree with you more when it comes to landscape books. Don't like them. Can't use them at the table. hard to read, honestly, when you're sitting in a chair. The only thing they're good for is sitting at a table and splaying them open and maybe looking at the art. It's an interesting format, but it's not a usable format, and it's not a gamer-friendly format. I held that John Carter of Mars book at Gen Con. They had a sample copy out. I was interested because I like that fiction. I like the setting. And I've always been waiting for somebody to do something really interesting with it. I picked up the book, flipped a couple pages, accidentally bent one right off the bat because it's so awkward to hold in the hand. And then I felt guilty about bending it, even though it was the sample copy. And then my second thought was, well, if I buy a copy, that's what's going to happen to my copy. And I was gone. It just turned me off almost immediately. So, yeah, not a good format.
That was Ray Otis from the Plundergrounds podcast. And if you're not listening to that podcast, what are you doing with your life? Thank you very much for the message, Ray. Yeah, I've got to agree with you about the John Carter of Mars book. It's a beautiful book, but to be honest, when it comes down to actual usability, it pretty much falls at the first hurdle. And in fact, if it comes to John Carter-esque sort of hijinks, I vastly prefer Warriors v. Red Planet from Night Owl Workshop, which is a hell of a lot cheaper as well. I mean, for like $19 on drive-thru, you can get the PDF and the softcover black and white book. And it's an old school sort of D&D clone, which adds in a bit of that John Carter vibe. And in my mind, it's far more usable than the Modiphius book. So thank you very much for your call in, Ray. Hope to catch up with you soon. Take care. Okay, I think we've got one final message.
Hi, John. Pete here. Yeah, I have to agree with you about the landscape books. They are a real pain in the arse on the bookshelf. However, the only good thing about landscape is for cheat sheets. I often prefer having my cheat sheets in landscape as it fits on the table nicely in front of me in just one page. But a book, nah, you can keep it.
That's Pete Jones, a fellow delver in Cody Mazur's Barrow Maze game. Great to hear from you, Pete. Yeah, I think you make a very good point there. Cheat sheets, I do actually quite like in a landscape format, you know, especially if it's just like one sheet of A4, which is like my cheat sheets. I don't want loads of them. Otherwise, hell, I may as well have a book. But yeah, you make a good point. Cheat sheets, I do quite like landscape. You can fit more stuff in like multiple columns on the page. So that's a very good point. So thank you very much for all those call-ins, everybody. Please keep the voicemails coming in. I really do enjoy listening and responding to those. But let's get on with the main crux of the episode, which is Arneson Appreciation Month. Okay, so welcome back to the Red Dice Diaries podcast. And the Anchorites are doing an Anchorites Arneson Appreciation Month. Now, I made the joke when they were talking about it that I was going to call mine I Know Arse All About Arneson. But when I think about it, I actually do know a bit just because I've like picked up a few bits and pieces here and there from the online role-playing community. But as I was thinking about it, it occurred to me that it'd be interesting because everyone's always saying,
Arneson doesn't get talked about as much as Gygax. He's like the forgotten hero of like D&D and blah blah blah.
I was thinking, well, how much of that is down to the fact that information was hard to come across back then, whereas now obviously we have the internet and stuff like that. So I thought it'd be interesting to find out how someone with fairly little to no knowledge of Arneson, how quickly they could find out stuff about them using just the internet and like a laptop or whatever. But I thought it wouldn't be very appropriate for me to do it since I do know a little bit about him. However, my wife Hannah has kindly volunteered to be the sort of test subject for this episode. So all I've done is I've told Hannah that Dave Arneson was involved in Dungeons and Dragons, and I've given her the spelling of his name. So how much do you actually know about Dave Arneson to start with, love?
Other than he was one of the original D&D people, nothing. and I wouldn't have known that from his name if you'd not told me. Although when you said his name, I did Google it, and the first picture, yeah, I do recognise he's that like fat beard guy with the massive forehead and the dodgy specs.
Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're just going to see how quickly Hannah can find out a reasonable amount about Dave Arneson using just the internet. So what you're going to do first of all, you said you've gone onto Google, although I should point out for balance reasons that other search engines are available. So you've got into Google, you've typed in Dave Arneson. What are we looking at?
Straight up, we've got his Wikipedia page come up. We've got a couple of things. Dave Arneson on Britannica.com, American inventor of D&D and other games, including Chainmail. Oh, there you go. And then the cookies kick in. What else we got? What are the driving factors in the falling out between? I'm assuming that's going to be Dave Arneson and Gary Gygax.
Yeah, most likely the whole sort of argument between them two is something that often gets flagged.
Right, so there was an argument between them then, I take it. Blackmore Castle, official website for Dave Arneson. Has a couple of obituaries. Although that doesn't surprise me because he's a couple of years older than my mum is.
Okay, so where are you planning on going next? So just to let you know, Hannah's just typed in what's the story behind the D&D creation into Google.
Geek and Sundry is the first thing to come up, which describes Dave Arneson and Gary Gygax as a brace of Midwestern wizards, which amuses me. Let's have a look at this story then. So yeah, you'll probably have to pause here and just give me a minute to read this, darling. So, apparently, Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson were both in the 60s and 70s part of the same gaming group called the Castle and Crusade Society.
Hey, Future John here. Just wanted to say that Gygax's gaming group being called the Castles and Crusades group is the reason why Troll Lord Games fantasy sort of D&D takeoff game using the Siege engine is called Castles and Crusades.
Which seems to be very early war games stuff. And Gygax was working on a pre-D&D game called Chainmail, which I had never heard of until I started reading this. I just assumed it was the early 2000s D&D war game Chainmail, which is one of these ones with the plastic spiral bound cover, straight off the photocopier, priced at $5.
That's an old school sort of fanzine feel, isn't it?
Which actually seems quite high to me, but then I suppose $5 then was £2.50 then.
Quite possibly, yeah. I'm not really up on the exchange rates of the 60s and 70s. There's a lamentable lack of knowledge in my department.
In fact, I'm not even sure if it would have been £2.50 or if we were still on shillings at the time. Certainly some of this time we would have been.
Future John here again. According to Google, $5 in 1980 is roughly equivalent to about $14.56 in the year 2016, based on inflation rates.
So Arneson reads Chainmail fantasy rules and then takes them and improves on them and makes this game called Blackmore, which he takes down to Gary Gygax. Gygax loves it, comes back with the Greyhawk campaign, and then they like work on refining it all, and they end up with D&D.
And obviously, we know sort of like Greyhawk's been used in like numerous versions of D&D, hasn't it?
Well, yeah, it's the default D&D campaign world, isn't it?
Yeah, certainly for version 3 and 3.5. I don't know about others.
I think it was like the Greyhawk gods were in the AD&D books as like your default gods to look at for your cleric. And there are a couple of other things that you'd now probably consider Greyhawk specific.
Well, I know a lot of the Greyhawk concepts got ported into a lot of other campaigns, didn't they?
Well, yeah, as I say, because it's the default, everything that's in Greyhawk can be somewhere else as well, can't it?
Mm-hmm.
Money, arguments, lawsuits. Him and Gygax had a fallout. Vampire came in, and so did some other games, and D&D wasn't like the prom queen anymore. Yeah. And then obviously TSR got bought out by Wizards. So yeah, that's where this sort of thing finishes. What else can we find out about him? Right, what D&D stories?
I should probably point out at this part of the podcast that if you hear a sound that sounds like someone licking themselves next to the microphone, I assure you it's not myself or Hannah just really getting into the podcasting. One of our cats, Mash, obviously slightly perturbed by the fact that we were paying the microphone all the attention and not giving him any, decided to plonk himself down right next to the microphone whilst we were recording and begin to clean himself as noisily as he possibly could. So that's what you're hearing. No need to panic.
So Arneson reads Chainmail Fantasy rules and then like takes them and improves on them and makes this game called Blackmore, which he takes down to Gary Gygax. Gygax loves it, comes back with the Greyhawk campaign, and then they like work on refining it all, and they end up with D&D.
And obviously we know sort of like Greyhawk's been used in like numerous versions of D&D, hasn't it?
Well, yeah, it's the default D&D campaign world, isn't it?
Yeah, certainly for version 3 and 3.5. I don't know about others.
I think it was like the Greyhawk gods were in the AD&D books as like your default gods to look at for your cleric. And there are a couple of other things that you'd now probably consider Greyhawk specific.
Well, I know a lot of the Greyhawk concepts got ported into a lot of other campaigns, didn't they?
Well, yeah, as I say, because it's the default, everything that's in Greyhawk can be somewhere else as well, can't it?
Mm-hmm.
Money, arguments, lawsuits. Him and Gygax had a fallout. Vampire came in, and so did some other games, and D&D wasn't like the prom queen anymore. Yeah. And then obviously TSR got bought out by Wizards. So yeah, that's where this sort of thing finishes. What else can we find out about him? Right, what D&D stories? Did Dave Arneson right? Oh yeah, let's take a look at his biography on Wikipedia. Blackmore D&D. And then after TSR, he did Dungeon Master's Index. Oh yeah, we had a copy of that, I think.
Yeah, because I believe part of the sort of like the falling out was like when it was like basic D&D, he was sort of credited on it and he got like mad royalties from it. Well, relatively mad royalties from it. I mean, it was a niche game, but then when they did like AD&D, he was sort of like scrubbed off it, so he didn't get any royalties for that. I think that's what led to like the lawsuits and whatnot.
Did a version of Blackmore for Goodman Games in 2004. And then Code Monkey have released a 4th edition version in 2009. He's done... I was involved in a video documentary about the early history of RPGs. I bet that'll take a while to track down. Inducted into the Academy of Adventure Gaming Arts and Design's Hall of Fame, known as the Charles Robert Award, in 1984.
Never heard of it.
In
My I was only 4.
I was going to say.
The Charles S. Robert Awards, or CSR Awards, was an annual award for excellence in the historical wargaming hobby, named in honour of Charles S. Roberts, the father of wargaming, who founded Avalon Hill. It was informally called a Charlie and officially called a Charles S. Roberts Awards. The Wargamer magazine called it very prestigious, and it was created at the first Origins game convention in 1975. The last year that the award was given was 2012, and a complete list of award winners can be found on Wikipedia.
In 1999, Pyramid magazine named him one of the millennium's most influential people, at least in the realm of adventure gaming.
You know, there's nothing like digging someone up to like cut the legs out from underneath them, is there? Oh yeah, you're one of the millennium's most influential people. Well, at least in adventure games. That's like going like, oh my god, you're one of the richest men in the street.
Also been awarded the Order of the Stick from Dork Tower. And
Is it wrong that I find that more impressive?
well, yeah. D&D Online created an item called Mantle of the World Shaper. That's a reward for finishing a particular quest chain that's narrated by Arneson. Let me say that again in English. So D&D Online added a special item that you could win if you finished a quest called the Threnell quest chain that's narrated by Arneson. Why am I saying it like that?
I don't know, but what's a Threnell? That's what I want to know.
I don't know. Yeah, so I don't have a fat lot of D&D of
Also, the mantle's description reads, "A comforting and inspiring presence surrounds you as you hold this cloak. Arcane runes run along the edges of the fine cape, and masterfully drawn on the silken lining is an incredibly detailed map of a place named Blackmore." That's how I imagine it's going to be read in the game. I've never played D&D Online, but it sounds like something an old wizardly dude would say.
I've just realised the cat's been sat next to the microphone licking itself for the last 5 minutes. Apologies for that, anyone
I'll
that's listening.
I'll tell the listeners it was you.
Yeah.
Okay, so we found out a bit about D&D. Is there anything more we can find out about him in his sort of like more general, like not specifically associated with D&D? Okay, so Anna's taking me quite literally, and she's typing into Google, what did Dave Arneson do that wasn't D&D? You know, don't be around the bush. I like the fact you typed in like, what did he do apart from D&D, and immediately the search is like, why did Dave Arneson and Gary Gygax fall out during D&D?
Yeah.
I do think it's a bit unfortunate in a way, to be perfectly honest.
To be honest, it's kind of sad because that seems to be everything that's like.
Yeah, and I know this. One of the points of like doing this this sort of month of podcasts is that people are trying to sort of get away from that a bit. But it does seem like, so I've done a bit of research myself. It does seem that like every other article you find is just sort of like, oh, let's retell and retread the same old ground that why Gygax and Arneson fell out. And I know we've sort of touched on it briefly, but there's like hundreds of like articles and blog posts and stuff, all retreading the same old ground. And it's like, when do you get to that point when there's like there's nothing more to be like ringed out of the same old story? That unfortunately,
it's kind of bleak. This stuff happens.
I mean, the thing I find a bit annoying is like the pendulum sort of tends to either swing in one direction or the other. There's no balance. It's like, so originally, like, no one talked about Arneson at all, so people are now looking at him, and now like a lot of people have decided Arneson was like terribly mistreated. It wasn't Gygax like a horrible person, because he's obviously the villain of this piece. Because obviously not everybody, but a lot of people don't seem to appreciate the fact that like, oh, they were just like two guys, you know, just like two guys with like all the same like flaws, the same positives and negatives that anyone could have. They had a bit of a falling out. Things got a little bit bitter over money, which, let's face it, it's what causes a lot of problems in the world. And it just sort of spiraled out of control from there. And that's really all you can say about it. Well, that's all I'm going to say about it anyway. Okay, so Hannah's now looking on Thrift Books at Books by Dave Arneson. Like I see, we've got
Shadowrun.
DNA DOA by Dave Arneson. What's a book overview? Say, oh, no synopsis available. That's bloody useful.
Yeah, well, it's second-hand D&D books. Look, you can't expect too much.
Okay, so on this page we've got some of the original Dungeons and Dragons. We've got Blackmore, the Wizard's Cabal, which is out of stock. Obviously, the original Dungeons and Dragons is out of stock on this site. Dave Arneson's Blackmore, which I think's 3.5, and that's on here for like $167. There is not enough Blackmore in the world to make me want to spend that much money on it.
Go on, let's take a look on eBay. What's this stuff going for?
Oh, I shudder to think, man. Because I bet it's all collector's stuff now.
Well,
and you know what it's like.
The Pratchett books were going for when people were talking about his stuff more.
That's it. Okay, so Hannah's gone on to eBay and she's typing in Dave Arneson in the search box.
Right, no, it's just that one place was...
that's more like it. Blackmore, £40. Yeah, look, D&D 3.0, 3.5, the D20 version. I do remember seeing a copy of that in our local gaming store, Spirit Games. Get a cheeky plug in there for Phil. I do remember seeing that. I vaguely remember flicking through it like back in the day, and it didn't really grab me, because obviously at the time I was like, it's just a bit of a generic fantasy game, sort of like setting. But I suppose that's unfair, since if it was the setting that a lot of other fantasy games are based on, it would seem quite generic now, wouldn't it? Because like so many other books have done things like similar. It'd be like me reading like Lord of the Rings and going like, elves and dwarves. Can you have a book with that, elves and dwarves?
Yeah.
But I do think it's a bit of a testament to the man, that the fact that they're still sort of releasing his stuff, they're still doing like remakes of his campaign setting, which, given that if you listen to some people, like, his name was nary a whisper in like the role playing community up until a few years ago, it's like, well, that they were still like re-releasing his setting for like 3.0. There was stuff around that he sort of had his fingers in like earlier than that. So I'm not sure how accurate the whole sort of like, he was erased from history, like someone had quantum leaped into like the history of D&D and just like erased him. It just doesn't ring true for me, to be honest. I'm not saying he got the big ups that like Gary Gygax got, but
he's obviously not vanished entirely.
See, the thing is, when you get a group of people working on stuff like this, one of them is going to be more charismatic, and that person is going to be the one that gets the acknowledgement from, like, the bigger audience. No matter how much each person's put into it. I mean, look at the Beatles. John Lennon was, like, worshipped. Look at Queen. Freddie Mercury carried them.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
Everybody puts in, but one person is going to get more acknowledged as, like, the leader.
Well,
and the fact is, they are kind of carrying them because it's their personality that's out there all the time.
Well, the way I've heard it expressed by, like, other people who've been talking about it is, in the sort of duo, like, Arneson was, like, a great ideas man, but it was Gygax who sort of, like, knew how to, like, write that stuff down, like, in a way people could understand it and market it. So, like you say, he was obviously, like, the business face of the company, and like I said,
and
obviously
therefore everybody's going to remember him as the business face of that company.
Yeah, because obviously he kept up with TSR and whatever. It was Gygax sort of, like, pushing the game for a long old time before he got foisted out of TSR and sort of had to do his own thing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I suppose you're right. It is only natural that people remember him. So I think we've probably rambled on for long enough about Dave Arneson. Now, I don't know what conclusion you've reached. I mean, obviously feel free to chip in. But the way it seems to me is he was a guy who had some great ideas. He got together with someone else who was good at marketing those ideas. They created this amazing sort of product, this Dungeons and Dragons, based on war games they'd played before, and they'd adapted and they'd sort of tuned down so you played your own character, and they developed between the two of them through various means. Arneson had a lot of the ideas. Gygax marketed it while putting his own ideas in. They had a falling out over money. Arneson sort of went his own way, did his own thing for a bit, and sort of, like, didn't get as many props as a Gygax, but neither did he, like, vanish entirely from history. And I think, to be honest, given the fact that if you cut out a lot of us sort of rambling, it's probably taken you less than 20 minutes to find out all that about Arneson from knowing nothing about him, just by a quick Google search. I think if he had vanished from history, it wouldn't be that easy to find information about him. And it does make me wonder that when people are saying, like, no one ever used to speak Arneson's name, was that just because it was, like, back in the day where, like, information was more difficult to get hold of? And let's face it, but before, like, the internet and whatever, if it wasn't, like, on a book down at your local library or your store or whatever, where are you going to get that information from? Whereas now, one of the benefits of the internet...
I know our local library wasn't stocking information on, like, biographies of obscure writers of RPGs.
Exactly.
We were lucky if they were stocking anything of RPGs, even the fighting fantasy
Well, it's
books.
like, you bought me that copy of that fantasy wargaming by Martin Hackett.
Yeah.
Part of the reason I love that book so much because it was the one book on RPGs that, like, the library used to have in when I was younger.
Yeah.
And it wasn't really about RPGs, it was about war games, which is sort of appropriate given that Arneson helped develop D&D from a sort of war gamey sort of background. And obviously there's many more people on the internet who know a lot more about this than me. All of the other anchorites are putting out episodes pretty much about Arneson, and some of them have got a vast depth of knowledge that I just don't have, because, to be honest, for me, it's not important to drill down to that level of detail. I'm happy with knowing what I know about Arneson and Gygax. Obviously, we owe them a great debt in terms of the hobby that they created, basically. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here podcasting about it. Had I wouldn't have worked in a local game shop, we might never have met. Who knows? We're talking about alternate timelines here. But certainly things would have been very different. I mean, I'm sure RPGs would have been developed in some form or other eventually, but it wouldn't have been in the form we know now. So I do think we owe Gygax and Arneson a debt.
Cheers to Gygax and Arneson.
Pretty much. And with those sage words from Hannah, I think that's where we're going to close the episode out here. So if you've got any thoughts on this, if you want to chat to me about it, disagree with me, whatever, drop me an email at reddicediaries@gmail.com, or you can leave me a voicemail message on Anchor. I really do enjoy listening to those voicemails, and I think it's a big part of what makes Anchor podcasts different and special compared to others. So until I see you next time, take care, and whatever game you're playing, enjoy yourselves. That's it from me and from Anna. Take care.
Night.